Welcome to the Authentic Leader Show. Today it's an authentic interview where I interview a business leader. It's an authentic interview with Scott Love, inside the mind of a Rainmaker. Now, do you have a new manager who is realizing that managing their team is different from what they thought it would be? Going from manager to leader is simple, but it's not easy. The Authentic Leader Show is the podcast for leaders of managers as they transform their new managers into authentic leaders of teams. If you work with new managers, or perhaps you are a new manager yourself, my passion is helping new managers in their transformation to authentic leaders of high-performing teams. In the first quarter of 2024, I'm hosting the next New Leader Lab workshop. It's a 2-day workshop specifically designed for helping new managers. The workshop provides the tools, the systems, and frameworks new managers need in their transformation to leadership. Check out newleaderlab.com to learn more about the workbook that's included, the follow-up coaching sessions, and a small group experience. Check out newleaderlab.com. I'm excited to share my interview with Scott Love. I was recently on Scott's Rainmaking Podcast, and we had such a good time, I invited him to join me on my podcast. I think you will enjoy this conversation with Scott, who is an award-winning recruiter. He recruits rainmaking partners for big law firms. He's also a speaker on sales, recruiting, and retention. He's an author of 3 books and, of course, hosts the Rainmaking Podcast. In this interview, Scott shares how to earn trust and be what he calls followable. He also shares his advice to new attorneys and what they should be doing externally and internally to the firm. He shares why people are attracted to problem solvers and shares his take on why a Montessori school may be strategically placed right next to a hospice center. You need to listen to that story. And then lastly, he talks about his discipline through rituals. Hey, I just want to get right to this interview right now, so let's dive right in. Today we welcome award-winning recruiter, speaker, and president of the Attorney Search Group. It's Scott Love. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Chris. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. We've been friends for quite a while now, and finally having you on the show. So I'm very excited about having you here. I think that we're going to have a terrific conversation here today. The more I learn about you and the more I research about you, the more intrigued I am about you. So I hope that we can bring that to our listeners here today. And I think they will be nicely surprised at some of the things that we'll uncover and learn about you. You've had roles in sales and recruiting. You've then gotten into the executive search business. Mm-hmm. And the later part really of your career has really focused on recruiting in the legal industry. And specifically now you are president of Attorney Search Group. Yeah. What is it, Scott, that has led you to the legal industry specifically?
Well, I like to be around people smarter than me. I find that I work at a higher level that way. I like talking to lawyers. It's really, and what's interesting, one of my clients reached out to me after she saw me speak at a conference, invited me to recruit for them. And then during our initial conversation, as we got to know each other, she asked me what motivates me about recruiting. And I said, it's not the economic opportunity. It's the thrill I get is earning trust. Yeah. Earning trust from someone that has been trained to be doubtful, skeptical, who is probably naturally guarded anyways, and they have a lot to lose. And they trust me with their career when I put them in a different firm, when I advise them on certain career strategies about going to this firm or this firm and all that. And that's what a headhunter, quote unquote, does, where we recruit. We recruit on behalf of firms. We place partners. I place partners in groups, sometimes get involved in law firm mergers. But I got into it primarily because I saw economic opportunity in that niche. I had a training company. I was training recruiters before I sold it years ago. And a lot of my clients were legal recruiting firms. So I said, if I ever want to get back into recruiting, then I'm going to choose that niche. And that's what I did. And I love the work. It's a grind, but anything you want to do, if you want to do it well, it's going to be a grind. Sure. So I love the grind.
Yeah, great. You mentioned something, and before we get too far away from it, you talk about earning trust. I know a lot of leaders and professionals assume because of the role that they're in that, hey, you should trust me because of who I am and what I've done or whatever. But I agree with you. It is absolutely something you earn over time.
That's right.
What is there a like? How is it that you earn that trust with your clients?
Well, I think the best way I can give that example was when I was a naval officer. I graduated from Annapolis. Here I am, an officer in the Navy, and I go to a ship and I have sailors that report to me. And sailors hate two things. They hate officers and they hate the Navy. And so I learned that I've got the rank, I've got the insignia, I've got the authority that's been given to me by the US government. They have to follow that, but it's about the person. And I learned that they're observing me. I'm always being observed. That's everything that every manager has to realize. You are a glass house. Every person that works for you or is a colleague of yours or a vendor, somebody outside the organization, there is this invisible bank account balance that you have with each one of them. And that's why you want to focus on putting deposits in the bank account balance, because you will have to take a withdrawal out at some point. And so you have to have that kind of thought model. And that's what I saw in the Navy, was that I have to earn trust. And it's not about being liked. It's not about having a personality. It's about doing things and doing the right things. And I saw that sailors, they would push back sometimes, and they would respect those officers the most that chose to live by some sort of moral code that said, no, I'm not going to do that. This is what we're going to do. That's the same thing I see with people in business, is that they're always observing you. If you have somebody that works for you, you give them a directive, they have to do it, they work for you, but there's going to be this range of commitment on a scale of 1 to 10. If they're just following you because of your authority, it's probably going to be about a 1 or a 2. But if they're following you because they trust you, it's probably going to be an 8 or a 9 or a 10, that
Yeah.
commitment level. And I think that's the difference. Those managers, those leaders, and you know this because you train people, especially new managers, they can get greater commitment out of people by being someone who is what I call followable.
True. I think you paint a great picture there. You can command people to do things, but that
Mm-hmm.
will get you what I call short-term results, right?
Absolutely right.
If you
Yeah,
want long-term results, it's about earning that trust. It's about earning that relationship with the people you're working with.
absolutely, Chris.
Right. Good. Well, you help law firm partners to mitigate risk when transitioning from one law firm to another. What is unique in an effective partner transition?
I think the number one variable is the business case.
Hmm.
Law firm partners, from when I talk with them, and it's a very niched business, but think of it this way: if you're a manager, you have people that work for you, there's going to be other people trying to recruit them. I've learned that people leave organizations usually for one of two reasons. One reason is a strategy issue. Maybe the scope of the work of the organization isn't what this person wants to do. Maybe it's changed over the years. They should leave because of strategy. The other one is leadership. Most people, I think it's probably 60-40 leadership to strategy. It's an issue of trust. I don't like the way our firm leads. We have a new chair, we have a new department manager, or whatever it is. And it goes back to that personal issue again. So I think that's the overarching, the business case. When they've decided that they want to move, I look at certain variables in terms of the type of clients that they have, the type of work they're doing, rates, other things like that. And then also I look at the clients, the prospective firms that I'm going to present them to. What's the business case for them? How will this person join? And so, for example, there's one partner we placed, an IP partner, that looked at different options, some through other headhunters, some through me. And the firm he joined was really, really good. He went from a really big firm to a medium-sized firm where he can be a really big fish. He can shine brighter than he ever has in his whole career. Oh, yes, and it's a Detroit-based law firm that's really, really good with a good national platform, and he does a lot of work in automotive. And so I try to look for what I call connection points. How many connection points can we get? There's an existing problem that you coming in can solve. You can fulfill a strategic goal or solve a problem. There's a shared client and there's a shared point of contact with that client. Those are the things that I look for. Plus, this partner coming into a firm knows about a dozen people in that new firm also, so the integration is going to go pretty well. So it's like a game, Chris. I look for what are the variables that can give us better odds of a successful outcome.
What advice do you give attorneys and their transition to a new manager partner role? I mean, what advice do you give someone who's brand new? I'm a new partner now. I'm in this new role. What's the first step they need to do?
I think it's two things. You've got to look at your external relationships with clients, prospective clients, trade associations that can be referral sources, vendors who can be referral sources, other attorneys, other professional service providers, then also internally in your organization. Getting to know as many people as you can that have shared connections in terms of an industry vertical that they work in, geographic need, types of clients that have matters. What are those different types of practices that touch what you do? I need to get good tax people, good people for labor and employment, whatever that is. So think of it like it's a business. You are an entrepreneur and you have to build a brand of trust externally and internally. That's kind of, I think, the overarching theme of someone coming into a new firm. You need to integrate deeply and quickly and effectively in those points.
Yeah, that's great. What is an unexpected realization that your attorney clients experience after their transition to a new role? Perhaps something they weren't thinking about ahead of time. Now they're in it. This was somewhat unexpected and realized after they're in their new role.
I'll tell you, uh, there's bad and good with this.
Yeah.
The bad is not knowing that a firm didn't really have effective integration protocols. That
Hmm.
was a surprise for someone. And after several years, his business that he joined with, which was good, dwindled, which was pretty sad. And I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know the firm didn't have that. I also think uh, looking at firms that have opportunities where they can solve a problem coming into a firm, I think where you know that you can solve a pre-existing problem or a strategic goal. I think that's something where there was one placement I made, which was kind of an opportunistic placement, a white collar partner, very successful global white collar partner, who just thrived in this new platform. And it was something that was a surprise. We weren't anticipating that. But for several reasons, much of it was just there was a gap for that type of work. She was able to harvest a lot of opportunities. So I think knowing what you're getting into, that's the advice I would give people at looking to move. Look at the best case and what's the worst case scenario. So those are some of my general observations on that.
Yeah. When you talk about ineffective integration protocols, you're talking about like onboarding them coming into the organization.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. A firm didn't have any sort of protocols like that. And this is a big firm too.
I'm surprised how often that is. I've worked for large organizations, some of which have had fantastic onboarding. And there are measurements that show that the better experience you have in your first days, right, in any new role, the longevity that you have in that career increases, right? But
Absolutely.
I've also worked for a large corporation before where I actually showed up on the first day and they didn't know I was coming. Are you kidding me? And my boss was on vacation that week. I
Wow.
mean, that was just the most horrific experience. So I sometimes
We're,
like to joke
we're,
about.
we're dealing with people,
I know,
even
right?
smart people.
I know that's true. I love what you talk about too about solving a problem. Like when you get in, start thinking about what's the problem that I can solve, and
Hmm.
it's oftentimes it's just really creating results, right? You should be able to create results relatively soon. You want to confirm for your new law firm that they've made a good decision, while at the same time you're confirming you made a good decision in joining this law firm. I imagine.
Yeah, I think it is knowing that there are different constituents when you join an organization. You've got your partners. Everybody has an agenda. Everybody does. It's just how we are. Your partners, the leaders, the people that run the firm, that are in charge of the finances, and the clients. And so, for example, I take that same philosophy in my own business development efforts. I kind of stumbled on ideas and realized, wow, that's actually a strategy, and was able to replicate that strategy, such as finding a strategic alliance partner. So
Mhm.
whenever I approach a prospective alliance partner, I always ask myself, how can I help them solve problems? If you're a new partner at a new firm, how can you help partners solve their problems? How can you be an effective mentor to other people? I think, as a rule, selflessness is very attractive to us as human beings. If we see someone who's involved in selfless acts that serve others, that's the kind of person I want to be around. We're attractive that way. One thing I'll even coach partners when they're interviewing is ask this question: how can I help my colleagues get better? If I join your firm, what are opportunities where I can serve my colleagues and help
Mhm.
them in terms of mentoring other people? That's the kind of person they want to have on their team. And so that's something I've been very deliberate and intentional. I love doing service work. It cleanses the soul. But I'm happy to talk about that in my business context to send that message that I'm someone that likes to pitch in. I'll show up before, I'll set up chairs, I'll stay after, I'll take it down. Being that kind of person, and as you know, what is that? That's a leadership quality.
Yeah.
So I think coming into an organization and telegraphing subconsciously, I possess leadership skills. I'm going to show up first and I'm going to stay late.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the first one to volunteer on a task force or something like that. We all know the people. We went to school, hey, can I come and can I help you with your homework? Man, that's the classmate that you want to invite to your wedding, and so I think, again, going back to looking at all of our constituents in our lives, there's this invisible relationship bank account. I learned this, Chris, when I was a midshipman at the Naval Academy. We couldn't leave the yard, the campus, except for Saturdays, unless you were doing a service project. So we would go sing at the old folks' home. We could call them old folks' homes. Now it's assisted living facility. We'd sing at the old folks' home on a Wednesday afternoon. I get out of the yard for a little bit. And I remember hanging out with this older couple that were in there together, holding hands. They'd been married for 60 years.
Wow.
And I asked the husband, I said, "What's the secret of being married for 60 years?" And he said, "Son, it's give and take, but mostly give."
Yeah.
And I think that is an effective business development and leadership skill in any aspect of business. You're an attorney, you're coming into a firm, telegraph to your prospective constituents that you have that. What are opportunities where I can help my colleagues get better? I think even anybody, that's what it's all about. Leadership is a solution to pretty much every problem in business because, as you know, all problems are people problems.
It doesn't matter what role you're in. If there's people who are listening to this podcast right now, if you're taking notes, take that note. Be of service to the people who you're working with.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
right.
tell you, you will go up very quickly in your credibility and in your leadership, even if you're not in a formal leadership role, by just going into it with that mindset. That's
Absolutely
fantastic.
right. Yeah, it's not about ego. It's not about a chest full of medals. It's about serving others.
Yeah. Yep. So true. When recruiting, you focus on what you call rainmakers.
Mhm.
How do you know that someone is a rainmaker, and why is it you focus on rainmaker for your clients?
Right. I'll look at their book of business, what they'll tell me that they're bringing in terms of revenue, but I also look for other thin slice indicators that tell me this is someone that can build a name and
Yeah.
someone that has a system. Sometimes they'll send me their business plan. I'll read them. Some of them don't have a business plan. They've still been successful. I don't do business development coaching. I produce a podcast called the Rainmaking Podcast, and I've interviewed a bunch of business development coaches. So I'll refer them to someone like that.
Yeah.
But I look for indications that tell me this person has the ability to get a new client, to serve that client well, to do more work with that client, to introduce others to that client, and to look for new opportunities to keep that name out there. And what's interesting, I had one person I placed, and most of the people I place, we become pals, we stay in touch. And he told me, "I'm not a swashbuckling rainmaker." He was an introvert. He's not the kind of person that's going to, but I love that image, a swashbuckling rainmaker. He's not going to be the life of the party when he goes to a trade association, but he built an effective business and he knew how to do that. He came into a big firm, Holland & Knight, big firm, helped start a new practice and just is killing it because he understands business development. It's not a personality thing. I think it's they know how to solve problems for people that could have a lot to lose, their clients, and how to keep their name out there and how to get the referrals and how to onboard it and all that. And it's just like anything, it's a system, it's a skill that can be learned. It's not a personality. You don't have to be an extrovert. It's somebody that knows how to do it. So that's what I look for. Indications that tell me they know how to get clients and serve them.
Scott, you have written at least 3 books that I can find that I know of, one of which is Why They Follow, How
Mhm.
to Lead with Positive Influence. Of course, I also talk about this, so I'd really be interested in why you think people follow leaders.
Yeah, I think when we ask that question, why do they follow? And let me kind of press pause on that. If we're going to sell a product or a service, what's the question we're going to ask? Why do they buy? Let's find out why they buy and sell to that. Before I present an opportunity to an attorney, I always do this. Are there any goals that you have that you can't reach at your current firm? And what's a criteria of an opportunity that would be perfect for you? And I listen. And guess what? I convey the opportunity to them based on what they told me is important. Everybody's reason is different. I might assume that you want a career ladder that you can climb. No, they just want to commute that's 30 minutes closer to their house, or they just want to be around nice people, whatever it is. Getting back to leadership. Why would someone follow? Let's find out why that is. I think trust is part of it. I also think that, well, actually, we don't need to say anything more than that. It's really
Right.
trust
It is.
is what it is. It's also competence. You got to have the competence. And in my book, I write about a story of being with a relative when he died. He was in his 90s, I think. It was my son's great grandfather that died in a hospice home in Phoenix, Arizona. And the whole family was there. And when he passed away, at that moment, I walk outside, and it was a beautiful day in Phoenix. And next door to the hospice home was a Montessori school, Chris. And the kids had just been released on recess. They're running out screaming and yelling. And I see the teachers, and they're standing watching the kids. They have their hands folded, just kind of chatting it up. And I'm like, how dare they? Aren't the teachers going to keep those kids quiet? There's people dying over here.
Yeah.
How dare they be disrespectful with that noise? And then I looked around, and those guests of the home, some of them were on their patios. All of them had their windows open. They were looking at the kids. And either through divine intervention or very bad zoning laws, there was a symbiotic relationship between these two entities.
Yeah.
The children are actually giving healing to those in the hospice home through their positive, noisy kid energy.
Yeah.
And I realized we don't know how we're impacting people a lot of times, but it is significant.
Yeah.
A careless word, a rolling of the eyes, telling a subordinate colleague about somebody else, well, that's the quickest way to ruin leadership.
Yeah.
There's this one guy in a trade association I used to be a part of that would always talk about everybody else bad things. Guess what? They're going to talk about you too. And so we always have to remember we are always being observed. We're always in that glass house. That's, I think, the key. I think it's trust, and that's the end of the story. And that's what I write about in the book. Why do people follow? Let's find out why they follow and lead to that. And in a nutshell, it's to become the type of person that they trust, to become followable. That's what it's all about. You got to have the competence, but they have to be able to trust you.
Yeah. Anytime someone is in a new position of authority, whether it be a manager or like a formal leadership role or whatever, that is one of the first things I tell my clients too, is that what you don't know is that people are watching everything that you do. Right.
Yeah.
And you don't know when that's happening. And that will impact career decisions later down the road, or
absolutely right. Oh yeah.
affect your business. If someone decides to work with you or not. So you should just always be thinking about that. I think it was Thomas Jefferson, I think, that said, imagine the entire world watching everything you do and then act accordingly.
Absolutely right. And one thing to that point, I've talked to maybe about 100,000 professionals over the years as a recruiter. I usually say 60,000 because I think that's more believable, but it's been a lot. And every time somebody wants to stay, I'm not interested. Why is that? I love my team. There's always an emotional context to that. And every time when I ask someone, are you open to hearing about other options? They say, let me close my door. I want to talk to you. There's always, again, an emotional context to that. It's about the feelings at work.
It is. And we're humans.
Yeah, that goes home every day to their house.
Yeah.
And so I think when managers realize that there is an emotional context to work, you shouldn't have to tell people, good job, but we're human beings. We thrive on that.
Yeah.
Abraham Maslow, that's our second highest need, recognition, saying good job to somebody in front of all of their peers. Wow, that's rich. That's gold right there.
What is it that Scott Love is disciplined to do that others simply are not disciplined to do?
Being able to execute when I don't feel like it.
So tell me about that. Like, how do you do that? I'm just not feeling it right now, but how do you get yourself turned around to execute?
In a word, rituals. I have certain habits and rituals because we have to think in my business, it is hand-to-hand combat. I mean, it is chopping wood every day. I wake up, got to make the donuts. And if you don't know what that is, go to YouTube, Time to Make the Donuts. It's an old commercial about the misery of waking up early, making the donuts.
I know what commercial you're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're the same vintage. So I think that no matter what you want to do in life, if you want to be number one in the world in that field, it's going to be a grind. It's going to be a grind. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And if you disagree with me, well, you might as well start buying more lottery tickets. And so it's really a grind, no matter what it is. I want to be a professional golfer. That's a grind. I mean, my version of golf is Saturday mornings, Bloody Marys with my pals. If I wanted to be a professional golfer, it'd be totally different. Totally different.
Yeah.
And so it's being able to love the grind. I gamify things. And when I speak to conferences, I have another brand, scottlovespeaks.com. I'll speak to people on recruiting and sales, and I'll give examples of certain rituals. And so some things I do in my practice is when I wake up in the morning, I have a mantra. I make my bed. I physically take action to have a line of demarcation. Night is over, day has begun. It is about execution. And I have a mantra. I tell myself these things. Today is going to be the most exciting day of my life. Everything I touch turns to gold. Everybody I talk to wants to do business with me. And then the fourth is almost an ask, almost a prayer. Put me in the path of those whom I can serve. And that's my ritual. I start my day just like that. I'm taking action, and that action reminds me to have the mantra, to change my expectation. And then when I come to work, I don't open up my email. I open up my database, and I start my day with a phone call. In my world, it's being on the phone a lot, 4 hours a day, talking to people, doing deals. I start my day the way I want my day to end. If I start reading emails, I'm going to get sucked into this. Oh, I don't feel like making calls. I might as well balance my checkbook and pay online banking, etc. Maybe it'll be an admin day. No, it's about contact with people. So in a word, to answer your question, Chris, it's about rituals. What rituals and what habits can we have that can carry us until we feel like doing the work? Action always precedes feeling. If you're feeling sad, stand up. My kid, she's like, I don't feel like doing homework. All right, let's stand up. Let's exercise. Clap your hands. Jumping jacks. Let's move. Let's get some energy going. And then you feel like it. I remember one day I was years ago. I'm walking by in our house. There's a mirror, and I look at myself in the mirror, and my face is kind of like this. And I'm like, that's just how my face hangs. I've got a song inside my head. Jesus loves me. I've got a song in my head. I'm happy on the inside, but my face hangs mean. And I'm like, man, I'm looking kind of sad and mad here. Maybe that's what my son's like. Dad, why are you always so angry? It's just my face hangs that way. So I realized when I'm around other people, I was more intentional about smiling. I go to the counter, I'd smile at someone, and guess what? They smile back. And what's interesting, I became a happier person, Chris. I started acting as if, and my feelings caught up. I think champions perform at a peak performance level even when they don't feel like it. Also, they know how to manage their state. Read anything on sports psychology. I've read a lot on that because, this is performance. You want to manage your emotions. And so one thing I've actually done when I've done sales training and all that is teaching people. Here's a mantra that can change your state. Your mind is just filled with chemicals. You can change what you think about to change your emotions, and your emotions help you to improve your execution. So it's all a head game, just like golf, Chris. Golf is 90% mental, and the other 10% is mental. It's all in your head.
That's true. I've heard the top 50 golfers in the world are all basically exact same skill level. It's all in their head of where they end up on the list there. For listeners too, I just wanted to call attention to this. Don't discount these things that Scott's been talking about. I know that there are people out there that are probably saying, it's a little too touchy-feely for me. I don't know if that. I will tell you, every effective leader I've ever worked with have similar sorts of rituals. I'm the same way. I will not open my email until I have accomplished the things I've committed to do in the morning first, because that will derail me, get me down a road. I'm sure that's happened to you too, Scott, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And sometimes I'll lie to myself and I'll say, this one time will be okay. It's never okay. It's consistency. Every time, follow these rituals.
And one thing I'll do, even if I'm like, I really don't feel like making calls, this is what I'll do. I'll tell myself, I'm going to take the afternoon off. All I have to do is have one intense hour of calls. And that's it. I'm not going to hang up. I'm going to press the redial button as soon as, and when I do that, I'm actually going to come across opportunities. If I spend an intense hour, I'm going to come across opportunities, and then I don't want to leave. And I'm like, I'm just going to stay here. I don't want, and then at the end, before I leave, okay, 5:30, 6 o'clock, I work till 5:30 or 6. I'm going to make one more call, just one more call, then I can leave. And sometimes you get that way. Text my wife, I'm going to be late. It's okay. It'll be worth me being late for tonight. This is a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. Your future self is going to be proud of you for pushing yourself
Yeah,
just that
thanks.
little extra bit, right? Remind
And
yourself.
yeah, and here's a note to younger listeners: take care of the old you. Take care of the old Chris.
Hmm.
Take care of the old Scott. Take care of the old you. It will catch up. I'm closer to 60 than 50. Didn't think it would ever happen. Someone asked me how old I was, and I said 22. Oh shoot, that's how I feel. That's how I feel. But take care of the old you. Put money in the bank. You don't need the bottle service at the fancy restaurant. Put money in the bank. Take
True.
care of the old you. Whatever you don't spend, you keep. That's the game.
Yep. What book have you read recently that's maybe had the most influence on you, or maybe a book that you're reading right now?
Right now, I'm reading a book called Subscription Marketing. I try to read every day. Not try, I do. I read at least 2 pages a day. And why I say 2 pages is if I'm in bed, I didn't do my reading, I'll wake up, turn the light on, read my 2 pages so I can check the box. It's a victory. Yeah, I want to have little victories. I think there have been a few books that have impacted me. I think Rick Pitino's book, Success is a Choice, helped me. That was one because I had a lot of low self-esteem. Another book I remember years ago, because I grew up, what's interesting is the relationship with money that some of us have had. I grew up as a poor kid, didn't have money. My family said we're going to be poor, but we're proud, but we're always going to be poor, and we're always going to be proud. And I'm like, I think I want to choose something different. And so I really had issues of sabotaging success. When I get to a certain point, I didn't feel comfortable. I'd sabotage it because I didn't feel like I deserved to be at that level financially. And I remember in a bookstore, there was a book on overcoming self-sabotage
Hmm.
called, and I remember seeing it on the bookshelf. It was actually in the business section, How to Overcome Self-Sabotage. The book title is called How to Overcome Self-Sabotage by Pat Pearson. And that just really saw that there are certain patterns in my life that I can change.
Yeah.
I think those are 2 books. And another one, tactically in sales, that has helped me is Pitch Anything by Orem Claff, where he was in the investment industry and he talked about doing large deals and how do you communicate in a way that can get a good result. I think the audiobook was really good too. Sometimes I'll listen to the audiobook and read the book at the same time. And then another book I'm reading, I keep on my shelf, is How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, talking about Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism. I know we've talked about that before.
We have.
But learning that what really matters in this world, living well and dying well. And, just things just don't matter to me that like they used to before.
Mm-hmm.
And just living a rich life. So anyways, those are some, and then the book of Proverbs, I think is great. There's so much wisdom. I want to know what the richest person in the world what code that person lived by. I want to know that.
Yeah.
And always being a seeker and a learner, someone that never gets to the point that you know everything.
I hope people didn't miss the tip that you just gave there about reading 2 pages a day. I remember years ago, I had a goal of reading for like a half hour every day. Like, who can't read for a half hour every day? And I found out that I wasn't doing it. I actually was in an accountability group where my accountability group said to me, "Chris, you keep having this goal, yet you say you're not reading." And I had to peel it back, just like you did, right?
Yeah.
And my goal is actually to read 1 page a day, right? It's just 1 page. But if I just get started, then I always read more than 1 a day.
Yeah.
There are some days, though, I can really only squeeze in 1, but I read 1 page every single day, right? It's a good ritual to have. So if you don't think you have time, you do have time for 1 page. Don't tell
That's
me you don't
right.
have time for that,
Absolutely.
right? That's good. Before I get to my last question, I'm going to insert something that I love. This is this great podcast, Scott. It's called the Rainmaking Podcast, and it's got a great host. His name is Scott Love. You probably know him, but there is a consistency in that podcast where you ask your guests to walk away and provide 3 things that you want the listeners to take away from the conversation today. If you were to identify those 3 things, what are those 3 things you would want our listeners to take from today?
I would say number 1, write down your targets each week of what you want to accomplish on Sunday night, not Monday morning. Monday morning is too late. You need to think about the next week. Look at your planner, look at your calendar, look at the opportunities you have in front of you, the things that are closing. What are 3 outcomes? 2 or 3 things you want to accomplish. Yeah. And I also think it's good. Number 2, I'll show you this, is to have some sort of a system where you measure that. My silly dry erase board is low tech. It works. Something, or maybe you have a high tech one, something like that. One thing I started doing also was documenting at the end of the day on an Excel spreadsheet. And I've been doing this every day since like 2017 or 18. I have two different KPIs, key performance indicators, that I measure every day that are unique to my business. And I have another column where I write down what was my greatest achievement for the day. I'll write it down. I was in New York yesterday. I had 2 client meetings. Boom, that goes there. And then what was my lesson learned? What was one thing I learned? Keep in touch with clients. Got new opportunities just by meeting with people I've had lots of conversations with before. But I'm in their office in New York, downtown, overlooking the bay, and I got multiple opportunities out of that. New opportunities. So writing down your greatest achievement and what was one thing that you learned. And one thing, Chris, is that usually the lessons are mistakes I've made. And I write those down. And so what I would do about once a quarter, I would go past a few previous few months looking for patterns and trends in the mistakes I'm making. Maybe there's some sort of a character goal or a virtue goal I can set that month to help ameliorate that deficit so that I don't stay in that trap of always repeating the same mistakes. So I would say write down your targets Sunday night before you go to bed, document your greatest achievement and your lessons learned each day. And then number 3, do a good turn daily. We learned this in the Boy Scouts. Look for a chance to do something for someone where there's no expectation of return. Maybe it's just a kind word to a stranger. Maybe you see somebody that's on the street that's working. They're playing music. They're performing. They're adding value. They're not asking for a handout. They're offering up service. Give them a 20, something like that. Just do a good turn daily. Those are the 3 things I'd recommend, Chris.
Great. They're fantastic, right? Number 1, targets. Number 2, write down your achievements and lessons learned, and then a good turn, right? If you could do those 3 things on a relatively consistent basis, you're gonna grow, right? Those are great.
It's a rich life when you do that.
It is. Well, here's my last question for you, Scott. What does it mean for a leader to be authentic?
It's knowing 2 things. What your vision and mission is for yourself. What are you motivated by? What do you want to accomplish? And then number 2, what are your core values? If you strip away everything, if you had all the money in the world, all the time in the world, all your relationships are perfect, what's really important to you? And live by that. But you got to clarify that first. And I think even for each role, kind of going back to Stephen Covey roles and goals. What are the roles in your life? What are the values for each one of those roles? Identify that also and get clear on that. I think when you're clear on that, you build self-confidence. And self-confidence is key. That's how you win people over. When they see that you live by a code, you know exactly who you are and where you're going. And that's the kind of person that they can trust. You then become followable.
What should a prospective client that you're about to work with, what should they know about you before even reaching out to you? And then additionally, what's the best way for our audience to contact you and to follow you, maybe on online?
You bet. And for people in the legal industry, I own the Attorney Search Group. It's attorneysearchgroup.com. One thing you can know about me is that I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to embellish, and I will keep your information in confidence, and I'm only going to do what's in your best interest. I play the long game. And then secondly, I speak at conferences. I use game theory as a lens through which we look in terms of recruiting and sales. So I speak at sales conferences. Sometimes I'll talk about retention through that lens. So if there's meetings in Vegas, you can find me at scottlovespeaks.com. I work with speakers bureaus also. So those are things I do, maybe about 20 speaking gigs a year, 20 live speaking gigs a year to all different types of business groups and trade associations.
Terrific. We will have links to all of that as well in the show notes page. So if you are listening to this in the car or you're out in the go, just make sure you go to the show notes page and you'll be able to get links to all of that information. Well, Scott, this has been a real pleasure to finally have you on the Authentic Leaders
Likewise,
Show.
thank you.
Thank you very much. And I look forward to staying connected. We'll be friends, I'm sure, for years to come.
Sounds great, Chris. Thank you very much.
Here are some of my big takeaways. What is it that stuck with you? What are the reasons that you see people leave an organization for another role? Do you agree with Scott's opinion that it's either strategy or leadership? What problems do you solve for other people? Do you agree that people are attracted to problem solvers? I think rituals, or what I call routines, when done consistently, can create incremental momentum toward your success. What are your rituals that help you lead to the success that you are achieving? Leadership is simple, but it's not easy. Acquiring and developing these key skills begins with the transition from manager to leader of high-performing teams. I'm hired to work with leaders of management teams and new managers to develop their skills and help them to transform their authentic leaders into high-performing teams. If you would like to help your new manager prioritize where to focus their development first, go to ChristopherRJones.com, where you can access the Leadership Diagnostic Tool for new managers. It's a simple tool with 21 questions, and it takes 5 or 10 minutes to complete. You'll get an immediate score right there on the screen, and then also a follow-up detailed report. If you work with new managers, or perhaps you are a new manager yourself, my passion is helping new managers in their transformation to authentic leaders of high-performing teams. In the first quarter of 2024, I'm hosting the next New Leader Lab workshop. It's a 2-day workshop specifically designed for helping new managers. The workshop provides the tools, systems, and frameworks new managers need in their transformation to leadership. Check out newleaderlab.com to learn more about the workbook that's included, the follow-up coaching sessions, and the small group experience. Check out newleaderlab.com today. If you can relate to anything that I shared here today, or you would like to ask me any questions, I would love to talk with you. Put a comment right here and I'll respond. You can also DM me or reach out to me through my LinkedIn profile. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn at I am Christopher Jones. You can find more information and other free resources when you go to ChristopherRJones.com. Thank you for joining us today. Please come back next week for another episode.